standing just outside the Jewish Museum in Berlin. I'm here on our latest synagogue trip, along with the 24 members of the community who are waving behind me. It's my first visit to Berlin in a few years, and my very first trip to this city was back in the year 2000. This museum had not yet officially opened, but the members of my group then were given a sneak preview and allowed to wander around the provocative structure designed by award-winning architect Daniel Libeskind. It was my first trip to Germany, and I remember feeling deeply upset about the metal building just there, with its angular and sharp corners everywhere, along with windows that have the appearance of violent slashes. From an aerial view, this Jewish museum looks like a metal scar on the landscape. 24 years ago, on my first trip to the land where my German Jewish ancestors had lived and died for at least 500 years, I was devastated that this Jewish museum talked not about the life of German Jewry, but about its death. Of course, since the full museum has opened with its many wings and exhibitions, all this has changed. But I will never forget that sense of profound sorrow, not least because putting death before life is so countercultural to us Jews. This week's Torah portion is called Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, and yet the 105 verses in the portion begin straight after the death of Sarah and go on to conclude with the death of Abraham. Why then, ask the rabbis, do we call it the life of Sarah and not the death of Sarah? The same question is asked at the end of Genesis when we read the portion Vayechi, which means, and he lived, and yet it records the deaths of both Jacob and Joseph. The answer is that we Jews choose life, choosing to focus on the needs of the living before we focus on our loss. Likewise, when we look at various sites of Jewish destruction, we must first focus on the richness of life as it was, before we can even begin to comprehend the enormity of the loss. Too often people visit Europe and see only graves and destruction. They fail to celebrate the centuries of Jewish existence and innovation. Likewise, they overlook the continuing and developing Jewish life in those places. They come to mourn and reflect, but not to acknowledge and celebrate the miracle of survival and renewal against all the odds. 24 years on from my first visit to this city, what I now love about this Jewish museum is that it does all of these things. It mourns the loss, often in provocative ways, but it also documents and celebrates, conveying the richness of the past, the present, and the future. It tells the story of a city that is, once again, teeming with Jewish life. Shabbat Shalom.